Can someone please find me a translator? I can't understand a word this man is saying. The laughter that followed Dr. Kwame Asante's polite inquiry about the children's eye clinic rippled through the hospital's donor reception like water through a crystal glass, sharp and cutting. He stood at the registration table of the annual Pediatric Vision Foundation Gala, his donation check for $2 million folded neatly in the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored tuxedo, watching as Dr. Rebecca Morrison, the event's host and chief ophthalmologist, turned his Ghanaian accent into entertainment for the assembled crowd of wealthy donors. I said, Kwame repeated slowly, his voice carrying the musical cadence of his homeland that had somehow become a source of mockery. I would like to make a contribution to support the children who need eye surgery but cannot afford it. Rebecca's perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth in an exaggerated gesture of surprise. Oh my goodness, he's trying to make a donation, how sweet. She turned to the couple beside her, stage whispering loud enough for half the room to hear. I think he wants to give us his tip money or something, probably saved up from whatever job he does. The assumption hit Kwame like a physical blow. In the span of 30 seconds, this woman had reduced him from Dr. Kwame Asante, Harvard-trained ophthalmologist, researcher, and founder of 3 vision clinics across West Africa, to a caricature based solely on the way his voice carried the rhythm of his ancestors. Ma'am, Kwame tried again, his accent seemingly thicker now under the weight of humiliation. I am here to discuss a substantial donation to your pediatric program. Substantial? Rebecca laughed again, this time joined by her husband, Dr. James Morrison, who had appeared at her elbow like a well-dressed shadow. Honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a private event for major donors. The community fundraiser is next week at the community center. James Morrison stepped forward with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to handling what he perceived as inappropriate situations. Sir, I'm sure your heart is in the right place, but this gala is by invitation only. Our minimum donation level tonight is $50,000. $50,000. Kwame repeated quietly, his hand unconsciously moving toward the pocket containing a check for 40 times that amount. Yes, and I'm assuming that's quite a bit more than… James paused, his eyes scanning Kwame's appearance with obvious calculation. Well, more than most people in your situation could manage. The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Kwame felt the familiar sting of assumptions based on nothing more than the melody of his speech and the color of his skin. He had experienced this dance before. The polite dismissal disguised as concern, the charitable condescension wrapped in a smile. My situation? Kwame asked gently. You know, Rebecca interjected, her voice taking on the patronizing tone reserved for children and those she deemed intellectually inferior. Working class, probably here in America, sending money back home to family. It's admirable, really, but tonight isn't the right venue for small donations. Around them, other guests had begun to take notice of the exchange. Kwame could feel their eyes like spotlights, could hear the whispered conversations that always seemed to follow him into spaces where his presence was unexpected. A black man with an African accent at a high society medical fundraiser, he might as well have worn a sign announcing his otherness. What Rebecca Morrison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 18 months ago, Kwame had quietly arranged and personally funded the surgery that had restored sight to her 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Emma Morrison had been born with congenital cataracts in both eyes, a condition that had left her functionally blind from birth. The experimental surgery she needed, a delicate procedure combining cataract removal with artificial lens implantation designed specifically for pediatric patients, was not covered by insurance and carried a price tag that even the Morrisons, despite their comfortable income, couldn't easily absorb. The total cost, including pre-surgery testing, the procedure itself, post-operative care, and specialized rehabilitation, had exceeded $300,000. Kwame had learned about Emma's case through his research network. A colleague at Boston Children's Hospital had mentioned the challenging case of a young girl whose parents were struggling to fund a sight-saving surgery. The irony that the child's mother was an ophthalmologist herself, someone who understood exactly what her daughter was facing but couldn't afford to fix it, had struck Kwame profoundly. He had arranged the funding anonymously through a charitable foundation he had established, ensuring that Emma would receive the surgery from the best pediatric ophthalmologist in the country, Dr. Sarah Chen, at Boston Children's Hospital. The Morrisons had never known that the anonymous donor their insurance coordinator had mentioned was a fellow physician who had liquidated part of his investment portfolio to give their daughter the gift of sight. Dr. Morrison, Kwame said now, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. I understand your concern about appropriate donations. Perhaps I could speak with someone about the foundation's current needs? Look, James said, his patience clearly wearing thin. I don't know how you got in here tonight, but this really isn't the place for whatever you're trying to do. If you want to make a small donation, you can do that online. There's a website. The dismissal was complete and crushing. Kwame stood there surrounded by people who had dedicated their lives to healing, watching as they reduced him to a stereotype so quickly and thoroughly that it took his breath away. These were educated people, medical professionals, individuals who had sworn oaths to do no harm. Yet they were inflicting a different kind of wound with surgical precision. I see, Kwame said quietly. It's nothing personal, Rebecca added, though her tone suggested it was entirely personal. It's just that we have protocols for these events, security measures. We can't have just anyone walking in claiming to be a major donor. Kwame looked around the room at the assembled guests, predominantly white, overwhelmingly wealthy, universally comfortable in their assumptions about who belonged and who didn't. He thought about Emma Morrison, the little girl whose laughter he had heard in the background when Dr. Chen had called to update him on her post-surgery progress. Emma, who was now able to see her mother's face clearly for the first time in her life, who could read books and play with friends and navigate the world with the confidence that comes from clear vision. Dr. Morrison, Kwame said, pulling out his business card with deliberate slowness. Perhaps this will help clarify my qualifications. Rebecca took the card reluctantly, as if accepting it might somehow contaminate her with whatever poverty she imagined he carried. Her eyes scanned it quickly. Dr. Kwame Asante, Chief of Ophthalmology, Asante Vision Institute. Below that, Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins Residency, Fellowship in Pediatric Ophthalmology. The card fell from her fingers like a leaf dropped by a careless wind. You're Dr. Asante? She stammered, bending to retrieve the card with hands that suddenly seemed unsteady. I am. The Dr. Asante who developed the Asante technique for pediatric cataract surgery? That would be correct. The doctor? Asante whose research on childhood blindness prevention has been cited in every major ophthalmology journal for the past 5 years? Kwame nodded quietly, watching as understanding dawned across Rebecca's features like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. But instead of the relief or embarrassment he might have expected, he saw something else in her eyes, a calculating recognition that her previous dismissal had been a catastrophic mistake. Dr. Asante, she said, her voice completely transformed, honey where there had been vinegar moments before. I am so terribly sorry. I had no idea who you were. Your accent, I assumed. You assumed what, exactly? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Around them, the other guests had grown quiet, sensing the shift in dynamics but not yet understanding its full implications. I assumed you weren't. I didn't realize you were a colleague. A peer. Rebecca's face was flushing now, the implications of her behavior beginning to settle over her like a weight. Please let me introduce you properly to everyone. Dr. Asante is one of the world's leading pediatric ophthalmologists. But Kwame remained where he stood, the donation check still in his pocket, his dignity still bruised from the assumptions that had been made about him based on nothing more than the sound of his voice. Tell me, Doctor. Morrison, what changed between 2 minutes ago and now? I don't understand. 2 minutes ago, you couldn't understand my words and assumed I was here to make a small donation for my tip money. Now you're introducing me as a leading physician. The only thing that changed was your knowledge of my credentials, so I'm curious. What did you think I was 2 minutes ago? And what do you think I am now? The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. James Morrison had gone completely pale, finally understanding the magnitude of their mistake. "The truth is," Kwame continued, his voice never rising above conversational level, "you made assumptions about my intelligence, my education, my financial status, and my worthiness to be in this room based solely on my accent. You heard the music of Ghana in my voice and decided I couldn't possibly belong among you. If this story is touching your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time." "Dr. Asante," James said weakly, "we didn't mean to offend. But you did offend. You offended not just me, but every person who has ever been dismissed because their voice carries the rhythm of their homeland. Every immigrant who has been made to feel less than because they speak with love for the place that shaped them." Kwame reached into his pocket and withdrew the folded check, holding it so that Rebecca could see the amount written in his careful handwriting. $2 million. "This donation," he said quietly, "was intended to fund surgeries for children whose families cannot afford sight-saving procedures, children like Emma." At the mention of her daughter's name, Rebecca went completely white. "You know Emma?" "I know Emma very well," Kwame said. "I also know that 18 months ago she received surgery that changed her life forever. Surgery that was funded by an anonymous donor who believed every child deserves the chance to see clearly." The pieces were falling into place in Rebecca's mind now, the connections forming with the terrible clarity that comes with recognition of a profound mistake. "That was you," she whispered, "and it wasn't a question. You're the donor who paid for Emma's surgery. I may have had some involvement in ensuring Emma received the care she needed." "Some involvement?" Rebecca's voice cracked. "Dr. Asante, that surgery cost $300,000. The anonymous foundation that covered everything, the surgery, the travel, the follow-up care. That was you." Kwame said nothing, simply watching as the full weight of her earlier behavior settled over her like a storm cloud. "My daughter can see because of you," Rebecca continued, tears forming in her eyes. "She's reading at grade level now, playing soccer, riding her bike. She has a future because you believed she deserved one, and I just mocked your accent and told you to find a community fundraiser." The irony was devastating and complete. The woman who had laughed at the way he spoke had been saved from watching her daughter navigate a lifetime of blindness because of his generosity. The accent she had mocked belonged to the man who had given her family the greatest gift imaginable. "Dr. Asante," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "how do I apologize for something like this? How do I make right the fact that I humiliated the person who saved my child?" Kwame folded the check and returned it to his pocket. "Dr. Morrison, you begin by understanding that accent is not intelligence and difference is not deficiency. You begin by remembering that the next time you hear someone speak with love for their homeland in their voice, you're listening to strength, not weakness." Kwame stood in silence, watching Rebecca Morrison struggle with the weight of her realization. The gala continued around them, but their corner of the room had become an island of devastating quiet. He could hear the distant sound of cocktail conversation, the gentle clink of champagne glasses, the practiced laughter of people comfortable in their privilege, all of it seeming to come from another world entirely. "Dr. Asante," Rebecca said again, her voice trembling with the magnitude of her mistake. "Please, I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me who you were immediately? Why did you let me—" "Let you what?" Kwame asked gently. "Let you reveal who you truly are when you think no one important is watching?" The question hung between them like a mirror, reflecting back 18 months of gratitude that Rebecca had felt toward an anonymous benefactor, now revealed to be the same man she had just dismissed as unworthy of her time. Kwame's mind drifted back to that cold February morning when he had first learned about Emma Morrison's case. 18 months earlier. He had been reviewing research proposals in his office at the Asante Vision Institute when his colleague Dr. Michael Chen from Boston Children's Hospital called with a case that had been weighing on his mind. "Kwame, I have a situation here that's breaking my heart," Michael had said, his voice heavy with the exhaustion that came from seeing too many children whose futures hung in the balance of insurance decisions and financial limitations. Tell me. 8-year-old girl, bilateral congenital cataracts, dense ones. She's been functionally blind since birth, but the family couldn't afford early intervention. Now she's at the critical age where if we don't act soon, her visual development will be permanently compromised. Kwame had leaned back in his chair, already knowing where this conversation was headed. What's the barrier? Money, as always. The surgery itself is complex. We're talking about your technique, actually. The pediatric cataract removal with immediate IOL implantation. But because of her age and the density of the cataracts, she'll need extensive preoperative imaging, possibly multiple procedures and months of vision therapy afterward. Insurance? Covering the basic surgery, but nothing else. The experimental vision therapy protocols, the specialized IOLs, the extended follow-up care, none of it. We're looking at close to 300,000 total. And the family? Michael had paused, and Kwame could hear the weight of another family's impossible choice in that silence. The father's a teacher, the mother's an ophthalmologist herself, Dr. Rebecca Morrison, works at a private practice here in Boston. They're good people, Kwame, but they're not wealthy. They've already mortgaged their house, borrowed against retirement funds. Rebecca understands exactly what her daughter is facing, which almost makes it worse. That detail had struck Kwame like a physical blow. A mother who was herself an eye doctor, who understood precisely what blindness would mean for her child's future, watching helplessly as financial constraints threatened to steal her daughter's sight forever. What's the timeline? Kwame had asked. We need to move within the next 6 weeks, or we risk losing the window for optimal visual development. After that, even if we restore her vision surgically, her brain may not be able to process visual information normally. Kwame had ended the call and sat quietly in his office for nearly an hour, thinking about his own childhood in Accra, watching his grandmother slowly lose her sight to untreated glaucoma because quality eye care was a luxury their family couldn't afford. He thought about the promise he had made to himself as a young medical student, that no child would suffer blindness if he had the power to prevent it. By the end of that week, he had liquidated a significant portion of his investment portfolio and established an anonymous fund specifically for Emma Morrison's care. Present day, Dr. Asante. Rebecca's voice pulled him back to the present. She was standing closer now, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. Are you all right? You seemed far away. I was remembering something, Kwame said softly. About Emma? He nodded. About the day I first learned she needed help. Rebecca's composure cracked completely. Dr. Asante, you have to understand, when the hospital called and said an anonymous donor had covered everything, it was like a miracle. James and I had been lying awake at night, trying to figure out how to save our daughter's future without destroying our family financially. We were facing the possibility of watching our little girl grow up in darkness, and then suddenly, this angel appeared. How is Emma now? Kwame asked, though he already knew. He had been receiving updates from Dr. Chen throughout her recovery. She's perfect, Rebecca sobbed. She's absolutely perfect. She can see everything now. She reads voraciously. She draws these incredible pictures. She never stops talking about how beautiful the world is. Last week she told me that her favorite thing is watching sunsets, because she never knew colors could be so amazing. Kwame felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. The memory of Emma's case had driven him to develop new surgical techniques, to refine his approach to pediatric vision restoration. Her success had become the foundation for helping dozens of other children. Dr. Morrison, Kwame said gently, may I ask you something? Anything, please. In the 18 months since Emma's surgery, how many times have you spoken about your gratitude for the anonymous donor? Rebecca's face crumpled. Every day, multiple times every day. I tell everyone about the miracle that saved my daughter. I've given speeches at medical conferences about the importance of charitable giving in pediatric medicine. I've written articles about anonymous donors being real-life angels. And in all that time, what did you imagine this donor looked like? The question hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She stared at Kwame, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes with terrible clarity. I I imagined someone who looked like us. Like the people at this gala tonight. Wealthy, white, American-born. Someone who would fit in at these events without question. Someone who spoke without an accent. Yes, she whispered. Someone who sounded like they belonged here. Kwame nodded slowly. So when you heard my voice tonight, when you heard the music of Ghana in my words, it never occurred to you that I might be the angel you've been thanking in your prayers? No, Rebecca admitted, her voice breaking. It never occurred to me, and that makes me exactly the kind of person I thought I was fighting against. The honesty in her admission was devastating. Kwame watched as she grappled with the realization that her own biases had been so deeply ingrained that she couldn't recognize her daughter's savior when he stood directly in front of her. Dr. Asante, she said. Emma talks about her donor all the time. She calls him her guardian angel. She's made up this whole story about him. She imagines he's this kind, wise person who helps children because he remembers what it was like to need help himself. Children often have clearer vision than adults, Kwame observed. She wants to meet him someday. She's been saving her allowance to send him a thank you gift, even though we've told her we don't know who he is. She says that's okay because angels always know when someone is thinking about them. The image of 8-year-old Emma Morrison carefully saving her allowance to thank an anonymous benefactor hit Kwame with unexpected force. He thought about all the children he had helped over the years, all the families who would never know that their miracle had come from a man whose accent marked him as other in spaces like this. What would you tell Emma, Kwame asked, if she could meet her donor tonight? Rebecca looked at him through her tears, understanding the weight of the question. I would tell her that her guardian angel is everything she imagined he would be. Kind, generous, and wise enough to help without expecting recognition or praise. And what would you tell her about his accent? I would tell her that the most beautiful voices in the world carry the music of many places. I would tell her that when someone speaks with love for their homeland in their voice, they're sharing a gift, not revealing a weakness. Kwame reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone. Dr. Morrison, would you like to call Emma? Call her? Now? It's 7:30 on a Saturday evening. She's probably not asleep yet. Rebecca's hands were shaking as she took out her own phone. Dr. Asante, are you saying, do you want to talk to her? I think it's time Emma met her guardian angel, don't you? The call connected after 3 rings, and immediately the room was filled with the bright, excited voice of an 8-year-old girl. Mommy, are you at the fancy party? Did you raise lots of money for kids who can't see? Yes, sweetheart, I'm at the gala. And Emma, I have someone very special here who wants to meet you. Really? Who is it? Rebecca looked at Kwame, who nodded encouragingly. Emma, do you remember how we've talked about your guardian angel? The person who made it possible for you to have your surgery? Of course. I think about him every day. I drew him another picture yesterday. It's a rainbow because I wanted to show him all the colors I can see now because of him. Kwame felt his throat tighten with emotion. He had helped fund dozens of surgeries over the years, but he had never spoken directly with one of the children whose lives had been changed. Emma, Rebecca said, her voice thick with tears. Your guardian angel is right here with me. He wants to say hello. The silence on the other end of the line was complete and profound. He's really there? Emma whispered. My angel is really there? He's really here, sweetheart. Can I talk to him? Rebecca handed the phone to Kwame, who accepted it with hands that were surprisingly unsteady. Hello, Emma? Oh. Emma's gasp was audible through the phone. You sound different than I imagined. Different how? Your voice is like music. It's beautiful. Are you really my guardian angel? Kwame closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the pure acceptance in this child's voice. Where her mother had heard otherness, Emma heard beauty. Where Rebecca had heard reasons for dismissal, Emma heard music. I am honored to be your guardian angel, Emma, and you are one of the bravest patients I have ever had the privilege to help. I want to tell you something, Emma said, her voice serious with the gravity that only children can bring to important moments. Every night before I go to sleep, I look around my room and see all the things I love. My books, my drawings, my stuffed animals. And I say thank you to my guardian angel for making it possible for me to see them. That means more to me than you could possibly know, Emma. And I want to tell you something else. When I grow up, I want to be an eye doctor just like my mommy, so I can be someone's guardian angel too. Kwame looked across at Rebecca, who was crying openly now, watching her daughter speak with the man who had given her the gift of sight. Emma, Kwame said gently, I believe you will be an extraordinary eye doctor. And when that day comes, remember that being a guardian angel isn't about having money to give. It's about seeing someone who needs help and deciding that their future matters. I'll remember, Emma promised. Guardian angel, can I ask you something? Of course. Will you come visit me sometime? I want to show you all my drawings and I want to read you my favorite book. It's about colors, and I could never read it before my surgery, but now I know all the color words and I can see how beautiful everything is. Kwame felt tears forming in his own eyes now. I would very much like to see your drawings and hear you read, Emma. Mommy, did you hear? My guardian angel is going to visit. Rebecca took the phone back, her face radiant with emotion. Yes, sweetheart, I heard. Now you need to get ready for bed, okay? But Emma, before you go, what do you want to say to your guardian angel? I want to say thank you for giving me eyes that work, and for having such a beautiful voice, and for being exactly the kind of angel I always hoped you would be. The call ended and Rebecca and Kwame stood in silence, both overwhelmed by the pure, uncomplicated love of a child who saw only goodness, where adults saw difference. Dr. Asante, Rebecca said finally, I need to ask for your forgiveness. Not just for tonight, but for every assumption I made, every bias I revealed, every moment I failed to see the angel standing right in front of me. Forgiveness is already given, Dr. Morrison, but the real question is, what will you do with this moment? How will it change the way you see the next person whose voice carries the music of a distant homeland? The conversation with Emma had changed everything. As Rebecca handed the phone back to Kwame, other guests at the gala had begun to drift closer, drawn by the sound of her tears and the hushed intensity of their exchange. What had started as a private moment of reckoning was about to become something far more public. Rebecca? Dr. Patricia Williams, head of the hospital's pediatric department, approached with concern etched across her face. Is everything all right? We heard crying. Rebecca looked around at the small crowd that had gathered, colleagues, donors, hospital board members, all of them curious about the drama unfolding in their carefully orchestrated evening. These were the same people who had laughed at Kwame's accent, who had watched her dismiss him with barely concealed amusement. Now they were about to witness the most humbling moment of her professional life. Dr. Williams, Rebecca said, her voice still thick with emotion. I need to introduce you to someone. This is Dr. Kwame Asante. Patricia's eyes widened with recognition. Dr. Asante? The Dr. Asante from the Asante Vision Institute? I've been following your research for years. Your work on pediatric cataract surgery has revolutionized the field. Thank you, Kwame said simply, his accent still carrying the musical cadence that had been mocked just minutes earlier. But wait, interrupted Dr. Stephen Hayes, one of the gala's major sponsors. Isn't this the gentleman who was asking about making a donation earlier? Rebecca, didn't you say? Yes. Rebecca cut him off, her face flushing with shame. This is exactly the gentleman I was dismissing earlier. The gentleman whose accent I mocked. The gentleman I assumed was here to donate his tip money. The crowd around them went completely silent. Kwame watched as understanding began to dawn on face after face, as the implications of Rebecca's admission rippled through the group like water through still pond. Rebecca, Patricia said slowly, what exactly happened here tonight? Rebecca looked at Kwame, silently asking permission to tell the full story. He nodded almost imperceptibly. Doctor, Asante came to our registration table tonight with a donation, Rebecca began, her voice growing stronger with each word, as if confession was somehow liberating. When he spoke, I heard his Ghanaian accent and immediately assumed he didn't belong here. I told people I needed a translator. I suggested he try the community fundraiser instead. I made every possible assumption about his education, his financial status, his worthiness to be in this room, based solely on the way he speaks. The silence that followed was deafening. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, perhaps remembering their own laughter at Kwame's expense. But that's not the worst part, Rebecca continued, tears streaming down her face now. The worst part is that Dr. Asante is the anonymous donor who paid for my daughter Emma's eye surgery 18 months ago. $300,000 to give my child the gift of sight. I have been thanking God for this man's generosity every single day for a year and a half, and tonight I mocked his accent and told him to find a community center. The crowd erupted in gasps and whispered exclamations. Patricia Williams covered her mouth with her hand, staring at Kwame with newfound awe and horror at what had transpired. Dr. Asante, Patricia said, stepping forward, I am profoundly sorry for what happened here tonight. This institution, this event, these people, we failed you spectacularly. And more than that, added Dr. Margaret Foster, the hospital's chief of staff, we revealed something ugly about ourselves, something we need to confront. Kwame remained calm in the center of the growing storm of realization and regret. Dr. Foster, what exactly do you think was revealed? That we judge worthiness by accent, that we determine intelligence by origin, that we've created a culture where generosity is expected to come packaged in familiar voices and familiar faces. And what does that mean for the children you serve? Kwame asked gently. The question hit the assembled medical professionals like a physical blow. These were people who had dedicated their lives to healing children, yet they had just demonstrated a bias that could affect every interaction they had with families whose voices carried the music of other homelands. It means, Doctor, Hayes said quietly, that we've probably made assumptions about patients and families based on accents, origin stories, perceived economic status. It means we've potentially provided different levels of care based on our biases. It means, Rebecca added, her voice breaking, that I've spent 18 months giving speeches about the importance of not judging donors by their appearance, while simultaneously being exactly the kind of person who would judge a donor by their accent. Kwame looked around at the group of medical professionals, all of them grappling with the implications of what they had witnessed and participated in. Let me share something with you that might provide some perspective. The crowd leaned in, eager for whatever wisdom this man they had so wrongly dismissed might offer. Emma spoke to me on the phone a few minutes ago. Do you know what she heard when I spoke to her for the first time? What? Patricia asked softly. She heard music. She told me my voice was beautiful. Where you heard otherness, she heard melody. Where you heard reasons for dismissal, she heard something worthy of wonder. The impact of this observation was immediate and profound. Several people in the crowd were crying now, understanding the full scope of what had been revealed about their own hearts. Children, Kwame continued, often see more clearly than adults. They haven't yet learned to associate accent with intelligence, origin with worthiness, difference with deficiency. Emma didn't hear my Ghanaian accent and think less than. She heard humanity and thought beautiful. Dr. Asante, Dr. Foster said, what can we do? How do we make this right? You begin by understanding that tonight was not an isolated incident. Tonight was a revelation of patterns that exist throughout your institution, throughout this community, throughout this country. The question is, what will you do with this revelation? Rebecca stepped forward, her face streaked with tears but her voice clear and determined. Dr. Asante, I want to make you an offer. Not just about the donation you came here to make, but about something bigger. I'm listening. I want you to help us create a program, a comprehensive bias training initiative for our entire medical staff. I want every doctor, every nurse, every administrator in our hospital system to understand what happened here tonight and why it can never happen again. That's a substantial undertaking, Kwame observed. It's a necessary undertaking. Dr. Asante, you saved my daughter's sight, but tonight you've opened my eyes. You've shown me that I can be a competent physician and still carry biases that harm the very people I've sworn to help. Patricia Williams nodded enthusiastically. Rebecca's right. Dr. Asante, would you consider partnering with us on a hospital-wide initiative? Not just training, but a complete examination of how accent, origin, and appearance affect patient care in our institution. Kwame considered this for a moment, thinking about all the Emma Morrisons who might benefit from medical professionals who had learned to hear music instead of otherness in diverse voices. I would be honored to work with you on such an initiative, he said finally, but I have conditions. Anything, Rebecca said immediately. First, this program must include not just recognition of bias but active steps to counter it. Concrete protocols for ensuring that accent, appearance, and origin never influence the quality of care a patient receives. Agreed, Dr. Foster said. Second, the program must include direct input from patients and families who have experienced bias in medical settings. Their voices must be centered in this work. Absolutely, Patricia nodded. And third, Kwame paused, looking around at the assembled group. Emma Morrison must be part of this program. Her story, her perspective, her ability to hear beauty where adults hear difference. That wisdom needs to be shared. Rebecca broke into a smile for the first time that evening. Emma would love that. She's been telling everyone about her guardian angel. Now she can tell them about the importance of listening for the music in every voice. Dr. Asante, Dr. Hayes said, you mentioned a donation earlier. Are you still willing to support our pediatric vision program after what happened tonight? Kwame reached into his pocket and withdrew the check he had carried into the gala with such hope. Dr. Hayes, this donation was never contingent on how I was received. It was about ensuring that children like Emma receive the care they need regardless of their family's financial circumstances. He handed the check to Rebecca, who looked at it and gasped. $2 million, she whispered. $2 million, Kwame confirmed, to establish the Emma Morrison Vision Fund, a permanent endowment ensuring that no child in your care will ever lose their sight due to their family's inability to pay for treatment. The crowd erupted in applause, but Kwame raised his hand for quiet. But more important than this donation, he continued, is the commitment you've all made tonight to examine your own biases and change the culture of this institution. Money can fund surgeries, but only changed hearts can ensure that every child who walks through your doors is seen as worthy of your very best care, regardless of how their parents speak or where their families come from. Rebecca stepped forward and, without asking permission, embraced Kwame. Dr. Asante, I will spend the rest of my career making sure that what happened tonight becomes a catalyst for change rather than just a moment of shame. That, Kwame said gently, is how angels are made, not through perfection, but through the willingness to transform mistakes into movements. As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with conversations about bias training and cultural competency, Patricia Williams approached Kwame one more time. Dr. Asante, I have to ask, why did you stay? After the way you were treated, why didn't you just leave? Kwame smiled, thinking of Emma's voice on the phone, of her drawings of rainbows and her dreams of becoming an eye doctor herself. Because, he said, sometimes the most important healing happens not in the operating room, but in moments when people are forced to confront their own blind spots. Tonight, a room full of medical professionals learned to see more clearly. That's a surgery that will benefit far more children than any procedure I could perform. And the accent that was mocked tonight will continue to carry the music of my homeland wherever I go. The difference is that now, at least some people have learned to listen for the melody instead of hearing only noise. 3 months later, Dr. Kwame Asante stood outside Emma Morrison's elementary school, holding a small wrapped package and feeling nervous in a way that surgical procedures had never made him feel. Today was the day he would finally meet his guardian angel recipient in person, and he carried with him a gift that represented far more than its simple contents might suggest. The Emma Morrison Vision Fund had already enabled 7 children to receive sight-saving surgeries, and the bias training program at Boston Children's Hospital had become a model that medical institutions across the country were eager to replicate. But today wasn't about institutional change or medical breakthroughs. Today was about keeping a promise to a little girl who saw music where others heard otherness. Dr. Asante. The voice that had touched his heart over the phone now came running toward him across the school playground, attached to a small girl with bright eyes behind colorful glasses and a smile that could power entire cities. Emma Morrison launched herself into his arms with the fearless enthusiasm of childhood, and Kwame felt his heart expand in ways he hadn't expected. "You're really here," Emma said, pulling back to study his face with the intensity of someone cataloging every detail for future memory. "You look exactly like I imagined, except better." "Better how?" Kwame asked, kneeling down to her eye level. "You smile with your whole face, not just your mouth, and your eyes are kind. I can always tell when someone has kind eyes." Rebecca Morrison approached more slowly, her face radiant with a joy that had become increasingly common since the night that had changed everything. "Dr. Asante, thank you for coming. Emma hasn't talked about anything else for weeks." "The pleasure is entirely mine," Kwame replied, his accent carrying the same musical cadence that had once been a source of mockery, now welcomed as the beautiful sound of home. "Emma, I have something for you." He handed her the wrapped package, watching as she carefully peeled away the paper with the deliberate attention of someone who understood that some gifts were too precious to unwrap carelessly. Inside was a child-sized white coat, embroidered with Dr. Emma Morrison, future guardian angel, across the chest pocket. Emma's gasp was audible across the playground. "It's a real doctor coat, like yours." "Like mine," Kwame confirmed. "Because someday when you become the eye doctor you've dreamed of being, I want you to remember that being a guardian angel isn't about having perfect vision. It's about helping others see clearly." Emma put on the coat immediately, the sleeves extending well past her fingertips, the hem falling nearly to her ankles. She spun around once, then twice, the white fabric billowing around her like wings. "Mama, look, I'm a real doctor now." Rebecca laughed, tears forming in her eyes as she watched her daughter embody dreams that had once seemed impossible. "You've always been destined for greatness, sweetheart. Now you just have the uniform to prove it." "Dr. Asante," Emma said seriously, adjusting her oversized coat with grave importance, "I want to show you something very important." She led him to a bench near the school's entrance where she carefully withdrew a thick folder from her backpack. "These are all my drawings for you. I've been making one every week since we talked on the phone." The folder contained dozens of pictures, crayon drawings of rainbows, watercolor paintings of sunsets, pencil sketches of flowers and butterflies, and all the beautiful things Emma could now see clearly. But it was the final drawing that took Kwame's breath away. It was a picture of a man in a white coat standing next to a little girl, both of them surrounded by children of different colors and backgrounds. At the top, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, Emma had written, "My guardian angel teaches everyone to hear the music." "Emma," Kwame said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever made for me." "Do you really think so? I wanted to draw how you helped not just me, but how you're helping everyone learn to listen better." Kwame looked up at Rebecca, who was watching their interaction with wonder. "She knows about the program?" "She insisted on knowing everything," Rebecca explained. "When I told her you were helping doctors learn to be better listeners, she said that was even more important than money for surgeries. She said fixing people's hearts was harder than fixing their eyes." "Emma," Kwame said, "would you like to help with the listening program?" "Really? I can help?" "Actually, we've been hoping you might be willing to make a very special contribution. Would you like to record a message that doctors and nurses can listen to when they're learning about treating patients with kindness?" Emma's eyes went wide behind her colorful glasses. "What would I say?" "You would tell them about voices that sound like music, about how accents are beautiful instead of confusing, about how the most important thing doctors can do is listen with their hearts instead of just their ears." "Yes," Emma said immediately. "I want to help doctors hear the music." 2 weeks later, Emma's recorded message had become the centerpiece of the bias training program that was now being implemented in medical institutions across 3 states. Her young voice, clear and earnest, delivered truths that years of academic research had struggled to communicate. "Hi, my name is Emma Morrison, and I want to tell you about my guardian angel. When I first heard his voice, It sounded different from voices I was used to hearing. But you know what? Different doesn't mean wrong, and different doesn't mean less smart. Different just means beautiful in a new way. My guardian angel's voice sounds like music from a place I've never been, but it's the most beautiful music I've ever heard, because it's the voice of someone who saved my sight. So when you meet patients and families who sound different from you, remember that you might be meeting someone's guardian angel, and guardian angels deserve to be listened to with love. The recording had moved medical professionals to tears across the country. It had been featured in medical journal articles about cultural competency and patient care, but more importantly, it had begun to change the way healthcare providers listen to the diverse voices that walk through their doors every day. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next one, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes in kindness. 6 months after the gala, Kwame received an invitation to speak at the hospital's annual diversity celebration. As he stood at the podium, looking out at an audience filled with medical professionals who had committed to hearing music instead of otherness in every voice they encountered, he thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. 6 months ago, he began, his Ghanaian accent carrying clearly through the auditorium, no longer a source of judgment, but a reminder of the beauty found in diversity. A little girl named Emma Morrison taught me that children often see more clearly than adults. Tonight I want to share what I've learned from watching you transform that child's wisdom into institutional change. He spoke about bias and assumptions, about the difference between hearing and listening, about the responsibility that came with the privilege of caring for others. But mostly he spoke about Emma, the 8-year-old girl who had learned to see physical beauty through surgery, and who had taught an entire medical community to see human beauty through acceptance. Emma Morrison is now 9 years old, Kwame concluded. She reads voraciously, she draws constantly, and she has never stopped talking about her dream of becoming an eye doctor. But more than that, she has become a teacher for all of us about the importance of listening for the music in every voice we encounter. Last week, Emma asked me a question that I want to share with you tonight. She asked, "Dr. Asante, do you think people will ever stop judging each other by their accents?" And I told her what I'm telling you now. That change happens one conversation at a time, one moment of recognition at a time, one decision to hear beauty instead of otherness at a time. The audience erupted in sustained applause, but Kwame raised his hand for quiet. But perhaps most importantly, Emma taught me that being a guardian angel isn't about having perfect vision. It's about helping others see clearly. Tonight, each of you has the opportunity to be someone's guardian angel, not through surgery or medicine, but through the simple act of listening with your heart to every voice that carries the music of a distant homeland. As the evening concluded, Rebecca Morrison approached the podium with Emma at her side, both of them wearing matching Future Guardian Angel pins that had become symbols of the program's success. "Dr. Asante," Rebecca said, "Emma has something she wants to tell you." Emma stepped forward, her colorful glasses catching the auditorium lights, her confidence radiant and complete. "Dr. Asante, I've been thinking about what you said about guardian angels helping people see clearly. And I realized something important." "What's that, Emma?" "You didn't just help me see with my eyes. You helped my mommy and all these doctors see with their hearts. And now when I grow up to be an eye doctor, I'm going to help people see in both ways, with their eyes and with their hearts." "That," Kwame said, kneeling down to embrace the little girl who had become his teacher, "is exactly the kind of guardian angel the world needs." As families and medical professionals filed out of the auditorium that night, many carried with them a new understanding, that accents are not barriers to overcome, but melodies to celebrate, that difference is not deficiency, but diversity, and that sometimes the most profound healing happens when we learn to listen for the music in voices that sound different from our own. Emma Morrison, now confident in her colorful glasses and dreams of medical school, had taught an entire community that guardian angels come in many forms. Some perform surgeries that restore physical sight. Others perform the equally important surgery of opening hearts and minds to the beauty found in every human voice. The accent that had once been mocked was now celebrated. The assumptions that had once divided were now bridges to understanding. And the little girl who had been given the gift of sight had given an even greater gift in return. The ability to see that every voice, no matter where it comes from or how it sounds, carries within it the potential for music, for beauty, for the kind of love that transforms both the listener and the heard. Sometimes mockery becomes the first note in a symphony of change. Sometimes laughter at difference becomes the beginning of learning to hear beauty. And sometimes the voice we're tempted to dismiss carries exactly the melody our hearts have been waiting to hear. The guardian angels among us don't always speak with familiar accents, but they always speak with love.